Hello and welcome to Inside Neyland Stadium, where Tennessee football just held on to beat Mississippi State 33-14. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor. We are with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. First things first, Nico Iamaleava exits the game. Second quarter injury, doesn't come out of the locker room after halftime. Josh Heupel asked about if he has any update, and he seemed, first of all, like he was in a good mood, which I think makes you think that his starting quarterback probably isn't seriously injured, but he also says he anticipates him to be good to go for next week. Obviously a big-time matchup with Georgia in Athens, an elimination game for Georgia now, and Tennessee with a chance to win that game, and then you're in a really good spot to make the SEC championship game, and then if you make that game, you're pretty much in the playoffs. So Tennessee with a lot on the line next week. It does look like Nico is going to be good to go. We'll find out more on Monday when we talk to Josh Heupel, and then also on Wednesday and going forward every night with the injury reports. But as of right now, not season ending. They feel good about him coming back, and you can take a deep breath. But let's talk about first his first half performance, and then Gaston Moore coming in and finishing things off in the second half.
Yeah, I thought Nico, we've talked about it. Coaches have talked about it. This offense kind of getting better, getting closer to hitting the big plays downfield. And you saw it. Squirrel White gets his first touchdown on a 34-yard touchdown in the first quarter, something Tennessee hasn't done in a while, I think since the Kent State game. Dante has a 73-yard touchdown as well in the second quarter. So you saw a couple of those big plays. You still saw some of the offensive woes that have kind of plagued them.
Sure.
Again, a little bit of a slow start, which, now you're here heading into that Georgia game with 3 games left. You're kind of left wondering, maybe this is Tennessee's offense. Maybe this is what it is. But obviously having Nico back next week, if that's the case, is going to be huge. But Gaston Moore coming in, I think the biggest thing was he didn't make mistakes. Tennessee kind of let him do his thing out there. I mean, he didn't hit on a lot of those big plays, but went deep on back-to-back plays. And was able to draw the 2 15-yard penalties to move them downfield. There didn't seem to be, we saw a couple weeks ago, he comes in for Nico on that one drive against Alabama, immediately throws a pick, but then comes out today and slings it around. So obviously the coaching staff does have confidence in him to be able to throw the ball, in a game that was close at that point, against Mississippi State tonight. But I thought didn't make mistakes and didn't really have a lot of pressure on him because Dylan Sampson played so well. A guy that we thought maybe for a moment he was going to be out with an injury. He comes back and does what Dylan Sampson does. So I think that helped relieve some of the pressure on Gaston Moore. But overall, I thought Moore did a good job to get Tennessee to the finish line tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Nico, I think you had to feel really good about that first half, especially considering what he did last week against Kentucky, which was probably his best game in his Tennessee career.
Yeah.
And then he follows it up with a pretty good first half. I mean, just in that first half alone, he got up to 174 yards, and that's just on 8 completions. Of course, 73 of them come on one play to Dante Thornton. And it wasn't the prettiest ball in the world, but I think you would rather take that underthrow that gives you either a chance to get that pass interference or for exactly what happened to happen when Dante comes back at it, rather than the overthrows that we kind of saw in the past. So I think you have to take that from Nico. 2 touchdowns on the game as well, but Gaston did his job, and that's exactly why he's on the roster, is a guy that's been in the system forever, that knows exactly what Josh Heupel and company want him to do, and he did a pretty good job at it. 5 for 8 passing for him, 38 yards, and gets the job done. The running game, you mentioned it. You talked about Dylan Sampson. He finishes with 149 yards and a touchdown, keeps that touchdown streak going, gets over 1,000 yards for his career, gets over 1,000 yards for the season, 2,000 yards for his career. But also the guys behind him. Peyton Lewis, 14 carries for 44 yards, maybe not as good as he was last week, but Cam Seldon gets in the mix as well for 6 carries for 26 yards. Talked about Dylan Sampson, but then also those 2 guys behind him.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan, again, carried this team offensively. And again, I don't want to make it sound like Tennessee, this was one of their better offensive performances, I think. You were right. They built off that Kentucky game. Who knows what would have happened in that second half if Nico doesn't get injured and had a good start. But again, I mean, Dylan's doing what you kind of expect him to do at this point. Gets over the 100-yard mark again, gets near another record. I think now he's in sole possession of 3rd place in career rushing touchdowns with 33. He was tied with Josh Dobbs coming into tonight. So, still 3 games left in the regular season. Then, you potentially next week playing for a spot in the SEC championship game. Then you got the playoff from there, or at least a bowl game. I mean, it's he's got some chances to break some more records before he's done here. So another impressive performance from him. But I think, we were wondering, through the first half of this season, what the rest of that group would look like. Deshaun Bishop, we felt like it created some separation there in that number 2 spot. Obviously, he's been banged up since the first half against Kentucky last week. Didn't play tonight, was held out tonight. But I thought Peyton Lewis has had a promising couple of carries tonight, and then obviously had the touchdown last week against Kentucky. So you got to feel a little bit better about that room. Cam Selden getting in the mix. We expected him to be the number 2 guy coming into the year, and tonight got some carries. So I think it's been good for that group to get some critical or carries in some critical moments. Still Dylan Sampson, the headliner there, but you're seeing them put a little bit more trust in guys like Peyton Lewis.
There's a little trivia question. How many sacks do you think Mississippi State got on Tennessee tonight?
Man, I can't think of one off the top of my head.
0. And that, to me, is a big improvement,
massive,
and it's
yeah.
the worst defensive line in the SEC for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
However, that is still a huge step forward for Tennessee, in my opinion. There's still areas that need to be cleaned up. There's still holding penalties and other issues here and there, but especially considering Dane Davis got a good amount of play. Andre Carrick didn't really play at all in this game. He plays the first couple series, and then it's Jackson Lampley coming in. And some of these guys are getting banged up, like Javonte Spraggins gets hurt for a moment, and Lampley has to come in for him before he then replaces Carrick. But at the end of the day, how much of a positive is it that Tennessee is now not only starting to continue to get the offense rolling as a whole, but starting to stack these offensive line performances? Because last week against Kentucky wasn't bad either.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and I think it all kind of goes together. I mean, you're seeing Nico improve because I think he's not having to run for his life or have the pocket collapse around him, which again is helping the passing game. You're starting to see that develop a little bit more. The run game's been good all year, obviously with Dylan, but I mean that only helps it when guys are blocking up front. So I think that's massive, especially this time of the year. You want to be at your best in November. I know it's a little coach speak there, but I mean this is a critical month for Tennessee. You're 2-0 in the month of November now. Everything's out in front of you. Going to a Georgia game next week in Athens, you got to feel really good about, right now, especially if Nico comes back to full health for that game, and some other guys are healthy for that one. But yeah, I mean, I think it all starts up front for Tennessee. I think that's one reason you've seen the offense improve the last couple of weeks, and this is the time to do it if you're that line.
Defensively, 2 straight games now that they've been pretty poor in the run game. This time it's gonna be a total of 179 yards on 38 carries from Mississippi State. There's a lot of times where, I mean, Jeremiah Thielander talked about it. They're not doing anything crazy. It's counter plays. It's regular run plays that just were gashing Tennessee's defense. But how much of a concern is it that the last 2 games now against Kentucky and Mississippi State, they haven't looked great in the run game?
I think it is a little bit of a concern, and like you mentioned the Thielander quote there, he didn't seem to come across like it was like something that could be fixable, and obviously this defense has given us really no reason yet to doubt that. But I mean, you're going to be playing a Georgia team with some good running backs with Etienne and Frazier. That's kind of something that I think Georgia will lean heavily on, especially with Carson Beck struggling here in the passing game. But yeah, I mean, to see that the last 2 weeks, especially against teams, offenses that are not particularly great. Kentucky, obviously, a little worse than Mississippi State, I think, offensively. But to see teams kind of have that kind of success, I mean, that is something you're going to have to clean up here. And again, I think you don't want to hit the panic button at all with this defense right now. They've played so well. But that is, if there is a glaring issue right now, that's one that they're going to have to fix, especially coming up next week.
Now, Max Gilbert comes out and knocks down all 4 kicks after going 0 for 3 against Kentucky. How much of a positive is that for Tennessee that now you're not leaving points on the field? 9 points against Kentucky that couldn't execute. Now you get 12 from Max Gilbert just from field goals.
Yeah, I mean, it was massive, especially tonight. I mean, that kind of helped Tennessee kind of put this game away. What was his field goals? And not just, I mean, they weren't chip shots either. He hit the 51. Yeah, hit the 51-yarder there before the half. Gives you some momentum going into the break after you feel like you were close to scoring a touchdown there before halftime. Hits one here down the stretch to kind of, of course, Mississippi State doesn't score again after that 14 points, but you miss a field goal there, maybe it gives them a little momentum and things start to look a little bit different. But yeah, he was massive tonight, and I think that's what the coaching staff expected to see out of him before the season. That's why he won the job. But I think it says a lot too about the coaches that they didn't panic either after that 0 for 3 night and thought, well, let's reopen this competition. Let's put somebody else out there and see how it goes. They charted him out there tonight, and it obviously goes perfect 4 for 4. And I think every single one of those points were important in this game.
Now, Georgia up next. they don't look great. They
No.
just lost to Ole Miss, and it's on the road, okay. But Carson Beck has been struggling. And with Tennessee coming to town next week, of course, you have the home field advantage in Athens. It'll be a ridiculous crowd, I think, for Georgia. But how much has your confidence level changed in terms of Tennessee going in and winning that game? Like, I would still even call it an upset if they win it, just because, I mean, obviously the Vegas lines aren't out yet, but I would still have to assume that Georgia's going to be the favorite in that game. But how has that needle continued to move for you after this Ole Miss game, and then you go back 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, and you kind of see this steadily but slow decline for Georgia? Like how much more confident are you now than you were just recently?
I'm a lot more confident. I think the beginning of the year, I have to go back and watch. Maybe we both kind of had the same. Maybe that Alabama Georgia game where the two, obviously you get that jumped out on the schedule as games that potentially Tennessee could lose. You beat Alabama here, obviously, and then each week this game looks more winnable for Tennessee, and it's a little bit different. 2022 Georgia was undefeated, I believe, going into that game in Athens. Yeah, they were, because it was your 2 AP number 1 and your college football playoff number 1 in that game, and but Georgia hadn't played great leading up to it. You felt a little bit of confidence. This is not that Georgia team. I mean, it's not the same at all. You watched that Ole Miss game today, and it just wasn't really particularly close at any point. And you go back a week ago, a Florida team that's down to a third-string walk-on quarterback, and they hang with Georgia in the fourth quarter. I think that game was tied late. So, yeah, I mean, Tennessee's got to feel really good about it, especially if Nico's healthy. There's obviously been some struggles on the road in the last couple years. You go back to that Arkansas game earlier in the year. You go back to South Carolina in 2022. To Georgia in 2022 was one of the loudest environments I've heard on the road on this beat. So it'll be a challenge for sure. I'm not saying at all that it's a game Tennessee should go in expecting to walk all over them like Ole Miss did today. But it's certainly a game when you look at it. Georgia's deficiencies in the passing game. Georgia, not being able to really stop an offense when they need to. Those are things Tennessee's getting. Obviously, the offensive side, Tennessee's getting better, but their defense, even with the run issues right now, this is a game where you could see Tennessee really take advantage of Georgia's deficiencies there, especially in the passing game.
As we get closer and closer to the end of the season, that playoff picture is getting clearer and clearer, and you would have to assume Tennessee probably jumps 2 spots now with Miami and Georgia losing. So we could see a top 5 Tennessee team going up against what's probably going to be a 6, 7, 8, something around there Georgia team, and from there you see what happens. But Tennessee feels like they're in a good spot right now, or at least you would think they do, with only 1 loss and everything in front of them, and with how wide open things feel. I guess Oregon's the consensus number 1 right now, but it doesn't feel like they're unbeatable or anything. It doesn't feel like Georgia did 2 or 3 years ago. It doesn't feel like Alabama has in the past. It feels like it's anyone's to win, which is why it's even more important that Dylan Sampson returns to this game and he's healthy. That Nico Iamaleava is theoretically going to be good to go against this Georgia team, because there's so much out there for this Tennessee that they can accomplish with how wide open things feel. But we'll have coverage throughout the rest of the week for Tennessee as they prepare for this big time matchup with Georgia. But also, basketball season is officially here. Tennessee men's basketball gets a win over Louisville today. Looked really, really good out there on the road. And then also the Lady Vols getting things started with Kim Caldwell. 2 large margin of victories for the Lady Vols to get this season started as they host MTSU coming up, a revenge game for the Lady Vols. We'll see if they can kind of get theirs back against the Blue Raiders. But everything you need Tennessee Athletics over at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thanks for watching.